way to sort of lead by example.
Were you a huge Friends fan like before
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, 100%. Not only was I a Friends fan like when it came up, but my daughter then went through her Friends phase. And so we all watched it, I watched it with her again, sort of all through it. And it was really fun to sort of relive it. That's the one thing that that show really has, is that it just will live on because it's so sort of timeless and funny, and it was such a great cast.
Absolutely. Do you get nervous? I'm not, maybe this applies to David Schwimmer, but do you get nervous like you've been in this business so long, either to like work with a certain actor or actress like you may really admire prior, or is it all, I mean, you've done so much and you've worked opposite so many people.
Oh my God, I get so nervous. I get so, like, I'm such a fangirl. Like, I will just gush and embarrass myself. I get so flippin' nervous when I meet like someone that I love, or that I admire, or, that I've been watching forever. Luckily, in my experience, everyone has been so cool and, you know, I think if you're like David Schwimmer, you get that all the time. So he knows how to handle it. And he does so with such grace. And a lot of times, you're surprised because somebody will be a big fan of like Ugly Betty. And it's like somebody who's iconic that you can't believe. It's like, oh my God, but I love Ugly Betty. And you're like, what? Shut up. You can't, what? No, that's impossible. So when you're around long enough, sometimes that also, because like I said, these people have been so cool that they'll just sort of turn it off of themselves. Like, I think they know that they are intimidating, so they sort of try to break the ice.
That makes sense. Is there someone in particular you can think of? Like, I'm a gay man of a certain age, so of course I'm a huge fan of Ugly Betty. Yes, I will fangirl out for a moment, but is there someone that has come up to you where you're just like, you just said, where you're just so shocked? Like, I don't know if you could think of someone off the top of your head where you're like, you watch Ugly Betty and you're this invested?
um God, I know that there is, and I'm just trying to think of oh, you know what? Yes. Okay. So it was at like a Golden Globes or something. And it was this is gonna be so weird because I was with Tony Plana, who played the dad, who played our
Yeah.
dad. And he's sort of been around forever and everybody knows him. And we were walking through this party. And when I tell you it was like, like the most famous people in the world being like Plana, Mr. Plana, Tony Plana, and saying hi to him. But when it was Robert Redford was like, Tony Plana, and Tony was like, hello, Mr. Redford, because I guess they had worked on something, and he was like, I love this show, Ugly Betty, and I was like, it's fucking
Wow.
about.
Right. You're like Robert Redford watches Ugly
Like, that's
Betty. I
not the
mean,
audience. Like, you are not our target audience, but here we are.
exactly. Can you tell, like with Goosebumps or like with Ugly Betty, like when you read something as an actress, like can you, I mean, it's such a strange business we're in, right?
Yeah.
It's such a fickle business. Like, can you tell though when you read like a script like an Ugly Betty or like a Goosebumps or like, wow, this is just so good.
Well, what's interesting is that with Goosebumps, we didn't like we had the pilot, but we didn't have any of the episodes. So you sort of have to just with Goosebumps, it was just like you were saying, it was just so iconic. And uh and you just have to sort of like throw caution to the wind. A lot of times you just have to be like, well, this is Goosebumps, so really like it's just gonna be fun. Like I'm just gonna be fun, have fun no matter what. But there are definitely times when you like Ugly Betty, not to keep harping on it, but when I read that, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And same thing actually with Love Victor. When I read, and again, I didn't have all the scripts for that. I just had one or two scripts, but I was like, the show was really lovely and sweet and beautiful, but also this is a character that um will be really complicated and interesting for me to play because she's so opposite of who I am. She's sort of like the other side of the Hilda, my character on Ugly Betty, the Hilda coin, like whereas Hilda was so accepting and so obsessed with her son and so making sure that he was okay with the fact that he was gay. Whereas Isabel was completely opposite with her gay son, really unaccepting and really hard about it. And so that for me was like a really, and also the script was very sweet and lovely, but like I was just really drawn to playing somebody complicated like that.
Well, you mentioned, you did have a gay son in Ugly Betty. You had a gay son in Love Victor. Now again in Goosebumps. So I mean, here we are. Like, do you hear? I mean, this is a trend, which I'm fine with. Do you hear from like parents all the time in DMs or just like, wow, like you've helped us relate to our
I do.
child?
I really, really do. And it's one of, I think, the greatest blessings of my life, if I'm being honest. And something that I treasure, especially I think love Victor really more than anything, because being Latin, that's a real thing. It's a real issue with the sort of machismo of the culture. Not to tie us all into one thing, but it is a fact of the culture that we're less accepting. I think when people are trying to come out. And so for me, hearing from not only from parents, but like aunts and grandparents and the kids being like, I didn't know how to tell my mom, so we're watching Love Victor together, and I'm hoping that that opens the conversation. Or I watched Love Victor with my mom, and my aunt and my dad, and like this was how I spoke to them and told them, and it really helped. So just that alone is like, okay. I mean, I'm good. Like we did it. That was an amazing thing.
Absolutely. Well, you were recently on Watch What Happens, and I'm sure it comes up very often. The topic turned to an Ugly Betty reunion, and you mentioned there might be like a reunion special, and you keep in touch with everyone. I mean, is this really likely to happen? And is there any chance of just a full reboot where we can have multiple episodes?
I mean, I'm gonna live in the world of yes, because we all want to do it so badly. And I honestly think the only way to do it is at least like 6 episodes. I don't think, because it's a large cast with so many different moving parts, you couldn't put it into a movie. Like it couldn't just be a 2 hour thing. Because every character is so epic, really, right? I mean, Wilhelmina and Judith Light's character, Claire Mead, and then Michael and Becky, who play Mark and Amanda. It's just and then the family, and you know so I think it would have to be that, but I can only say that we are so, all of us, from soup to nuts, will want to do it. And I think it's just a question now of like getting the rights, and like, because it was owned by the Colombian production company, blah blah blah. So but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Wow. Right. I mean, like, Vanessa Williams, I mean, she was just busy on Broadway, but let's even throw in some Rebecca Romaine. Like, let's just
Yes.
bring everyone back,
Now,
right?
isn't that interesting? I mean, that will be something really interesting that we all have to sort of like figure out and talk about, because can you do that now? Like that was back in the day where a trans actor character could be played by like a super, but can you do that now? Like, that's a whole other thing that we all have to sort of unpack and deal with.
Interesting. Maybe that character could be like recast and there could be some surgery behind it. Or I mean, this is
Right.
Ugly Betty. This is very possible in this, right?
Everything's possible. Absolutely.
Interesting. Well, speaking of Watch What Happens, listen, there's a lot of Goosebumps fans listening to this. There's a lot of Ugly Betty fans, but I don't know if you know this, but this is a huge Bravo-based Real Housewives podcast that you're on here today. So I have to tell you, if this acting thing doesn't work out, like you're coming for my job. Like I mean, you're in this. You were able to talk about Paige and Craig. You knew what was going on with like Potomac. So, I mean, normally, little, you knew it
No,
all.
I watched it all. I watched